Ozarks? All right, I'm going to talk about the Ozarks. I've also been there. I actually like it, although I've had some unusual experiences, and this is an essay about that. Isn't real life funny? I found this conference that I went to for writers online. It was relatively close and relatively cheap and sounded promising. There was a published author and maybe another one, a historic bed and breakfast, and sessions on skills that I was interested in learning. I arrived at the historic location Thursday morning and entered the meeting place to find approximately 10 or so entrants sitting around the hotel lobby. They stared at me. They stared at me a lot, and I soon discovered that we were running a little bit behind, nearly 2 hours, and I thought, well, that's okay. It's a casual interpretation of the schedule designed to put everyone at ease. Later, I realized it was probably just simply disorganization. Well, the actual speakers began, and I knew two things quickly. One, some of the participants listening to the speakers weren't just nervous, they were very suspicious, and some were even a little rude. I could feel that Ozark versus outsiders vibe that I thought was simply a myth. And then someone arrived who might actually be called a hillbilly, and I didn't think those existed. I'll tell you more about him later when I explain why I thought I might die at this conference. Now, I want to clarify that I'm from the rural community, and I don't judge everybody in an area by just a few of the people. And if you knew some of my relatives, you'll understand that I really do get the idea of quirky. I've got them. All right. The second thing that was apparent to me was that the majority of speakers were very nice people. Nice people who didn't know what they were talking about when it came to writing. And it only took me a few minutes to realize that the most valuable thing I was going to get from this conference was fodder for a new book. I literally spent a few minutes in the bathroom belly laughing at some of the things I was told. About halfway through the morning session, Dirk arrived. He was at first glance the epitome of a hillbilly. Real thin, with gray hair and a beard, sticking out all over the place, dressed in work boots, jeans, a plaid shirt, and a pair of suspenders that looked like a yardstick measuring out his shoulders. I'm not sure. Got lost, just a second. And at my second glance, and upon becoming better acquainted, much to my dismay with him, I came to understand why his parents had named him after a weapon. The lunch break came, and I checked into my room. Now, the room was worthy of some description, too. By now, I had already written down some ideas for the murder mystery, where a writer goes to a conference in an inn, and then the murders begin occurring. This inn was an English Tudor, refurbished in style by the owner, with fireplaces and antlers and chandeliers and tasteful furniture. The rooms were located up a grand curving staircase down a long, dark, maroon hall. Now, this bed and breakfast was in a historic building, so I expected some non-traditional aspects of my stay. The room was small, and when I say small, I mean the room was small. I have accepted that I am not particularly a small person, but I couldn't walk beside the bed, and to enter the bed, I had to slide down the wall to reach it. There was a board attached to the wall that I could put my laptop on, mostly, and that was the desk, and another small board attached to the wall to act as a tiny nightstand. The bathroom required me to step up, and the door had a bumper attached to it because when it was open, it was on the toilet. All right? The closet even brought a giggle because I realized I would have to turn my hanger sideways to hang my clothes because it just wasn't deep enough to put them in the right way. But, you know, everything was clean, and it was only 2 nights, and I figured I could survive anything for 2 nights. In the Thursday afternoon sessions, we shared some of what we write, and I quickly learned that writing romance, which ironically I don't write, was akin to working for the devil. I also learned very quickly that when we were sharing, and I shared that I was a retired teacher, this is a quote, We don't believe in the public schools. Okay, I can take that. We chose to homeschool because my husband and I wanted our children to really learn something, away from the teachers and those other kids. I was a little offended because I happen to like those other kids. But an interesting and heated discussion occurred later in the afternoon when one of the speakers talked about the reliability of resources and made a reference to a writer who had been discredited. That this idea was not something that Dangerous Dirk believed in became readily apparent, and we all got out of there as fast as we could. After that, I left to do some retail therapy at an outdoor mall and enjoyed some seafood at my favorite restaurant, where a man I did not know came up behind me, rubbed my back and shoulders, wished me a great evening, and went and sat with his wife, who then glared at me for the rest of the evening. I have no idea who that man was, and maybe he thought he knew me. All right, so as I returned to the inn with the intent of going to my own room to relax, read a book, and edit a little bit, I climbed the beautiful curving staircase, round the corner, and then see a looming obstacle between me and the sanctity of my tiny room. His name was Dirk, and he looked lonely. He hadn't seen me yet, so I hid around a column that was fortunately large enough for me to hide behind until he entered his own room. But then the bad news is, my room is just past his, next to it even. I tried to sprint down the hall, which is a funny sight all on its own, but he gads, his door is open, and he spots me. He sticks his hand out to stop me, and I do, in a vain attempt not to let him know just how close my room is to his. He opens with this: "There's nothing scheduled to do tonight. I need something. You have to help me." I don't know what's going to happen at this point. I can see into the open doorway of his tiny room, and I wanted to suggest that he watch, the wall-mounted television, or eat some of the numerous boxes of snacks and food products and drinks and cases of water that he has stacked there for the 2-day conference. I'm not certain what he really is going to do, but pretty much he can do anything he wants as far as I'm concerned, as long as it doesn't involve talking to me. But as I try to edge toward my room, he now invites me in to read some of his writings in his room. As you can guess, I'm not in favor of this plan. No, we could sit here. The first thing he shares with me is, well, normally I don't write fiction, I write legal briefs. I'm like, okay. The United States Supreme Court justices and their clerks all recognize my writing when I mail it to them. My inner monologue is, that's because you are on a watch list. But my comment is, these seem very clear. You have some talent because yes, I will say whatever I have to in order to live. I'm like that. And he shared, I don't even have a degree from college. I went and I could have had 4 degrees at 4 different colleges, but I was asked to leave each time. He leaned in to confide. Some of the teachers said they were afraid of me. I leaned back to pray. He then shared, I have seizures in the still hip. My inner monologue was, well, I've had a seizure or 2 myself, but seizures in a still hip are not your most concerning medical conditions. Then he shared, I take photos. You should see them. Come to my room. And I thought and said again, no thank you. I started wishing I wore a cross around my neck to ward off evil Dirk, and I continued to be firmly in the hall at the little table. I now know why the walls of the inn were deep red. It's because people die here, people who knew Dirk. He senses my reluctance and brings his computer out onto the table in the area by the open staircase. I'm fairly certain if I scream loud enough, people will run up from the bar, but who knows. He then proceeds to show me his numerous photos of flowers on his family's place. The photos are lovely, and Dirk explains his obsession with attention to detail, even explaining to me why I should not use the regular fonts on the computer. After suggesting I go again with him to his room so he can show me some more fonts, which, as you can guess, I said no. He draws them for me on a napkin, presses it into my hand, and explains that I should keep this napkin for further reference whenever I need to use a font. Okay. He also assures me of the importance to do all things correctly, and he also noted yet again that most courts would accept this font, but the United States Supreme Court was very picky and would throw out my case, if I should present one, if I did not use the correct font. I guess that's a good fact to know. I also realized again, as I studied the maroon walls, trying not to look into his eyes, that they were the perfect color to hide blood. Okay. At this point, I'm reviewing all the things I've read and heard about various mental illnesses, crime scenes, and personal defense techniques. I finally get to my room by explaining I must call my husband. Upon entering my room, I take a breath and listen to Dirk in the next room puttering around, probably sharpening a knife or a machete or something along those lines. I realize just how little there is to separate the walls, and that when I go to bed, our headboards are only separated by one thin wall. I lock the door. Then I do something I've never done in all of my life. I get the only loose piece of furniture in the room, a chair, and I block the door. Then I find my scissors in my writing bag, slide down the wall, and place them on the tiny piece of wood that acts as my nightstand for easy retrieval. I look out the windows to check the access and am very dismayed to realize there is a ledge outside. I study the emergency map for alternative routes out of the hall and to freedom, and I forego the trip to get ice. I'll drink hot pop any day. Sleep does not come easily, and I swear I heard a noise like someone next door chipping a hole in the stucco wall that separates our rooms. Day 1 is over. Day 2. Okay, I really debated leaving at this point, but I'm an optimistic kind of person, and I'm not one to give up easily. Today, the writers only have a short session, an appointment with a published cowboy writer, and then I can go spend some time with some friends that live within driving distance. They're really good friends, and they're worth the effort. So I go to the first writer session. I'm a little concerned when I notice that my new friend Dirk is wearing an uncharacteristically flowered shirt with his suspenders. And I'm even more concerned when he comes up to me and explains to me that he chose this shirt in honor of my love of flowers. It was a nice thing for him to do, mostly. But then when I go to the session where the speaker is still nice and wrong and condescending about them gals that write romance, which I don't, I get to go to a mentoring session where the entire thing can be summed up as, "You're a very nice gal, keep on heading over the range." All right. Okay, well, then it's time for me to leave and have a nice visit with the friends. I do those things, and I'm going to another event. At this event, I overhear things like, "Oh, we don't do novels. Our critique group focuses on short stories. We don't want to waste our time with novels." Okay, I'm all right with that. Then they say, "It's because those writers get paid." Well, I don't think you should always write to get paid, but if somebody wants to pay you for it, I still think that's okay. Now, in my own hometown, I'm a little out there because I have all my writery stuff and I wear scarves and crazy skirts. But in that group, I was not out there at all. You know, if I had like a fur vest, which I'd like to point out, there were some fur vests, but not like fur. It was more like hide, a lot of hide. And you could tell they'd done it themselves. It was interesting. I noticed as I'm making my way out of the building that some of the writers are pulling out large bottles of alcohol, like cases of alcohol, and I think I understand how they got through those gatherings a little more easily now. When I hurry back to my room so I can get there before my scary neighbor, I lock up, scissor up, and hide. It's a noisy night. It's a Friday and there's singing in the bar below. It sounds a little bit like cats squalling, but I've got a good book to read in my darkened room, and I don't hear anything next door that sounds like a saw being sharpened, so I'm content. Well, when day 3 began, in the morning I packed, and in one final attempt to get something useful out of the conference, I drove over to the college where the professional speakers were going to speak. On the way, I met an exceptionally friendly lady at the Casey's General Store, and then realized that she had so much stuff in her car she either lived there or she was on Hoarders. And at the event there was an even bigger group, and that there were some interesting characters there too. One woman took a nap in the auditorium during the speeches, which I completely understand that. I drop off during speeches too. However, I usually don't wear my nightgown and a crocheted hat with fur attached. All right. And then it was Sunday afternoon. The conference ended. I jumped in my minivan and I sped all the way back to my world. The world where I can revel in my love of flowers without the fear that I may soon be buried beneath them. And isn't real life a funny thing?